What happens when one of the most experienced interviewers in television history decides she is done playing nice, and the guest sitting across from her is someone who has spent years carefully crafting a public image that simply does not hold up under pressure? What happens when the cameras are rolling, the audience is watching live, and every carefully rehearsed answer starts to crack at the edges? What happens when the woman asking the questions has nothing to lose and everything to prove, and the woman answering them has built an entire brand on the idea that the world misunderstands her? You are about to find out. Because on this particular morning, on this particular couch, with millions of viewers tuned in across the country, Robin Roberts and Meghan Markle sat down for what was billed as a conversation about empowerment, resilience, and a new chapter. What unfolded instead was something that people would be talking about for a very long time. Not because it was dramatic in the way reality television is dramatic, but because it was real in the way that very few moments on morning television ever are. Before we get into exactly how this went down, if you are new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel covers the stories that actually matter, the moments behind the headlines, the conversations that reveal more than the people involved ever intended. Drop a comment below and tell us, did you think Robin Roberts would ever go this far? Let us know what you think, down now. Let us set the scene. The studio was bright in the way that morning. Television studios always are, lit to flatten shadows and soften edges, designed to make everything feel warmer and more comfortable than it actually is. The audience was seated. The production team had been briefed. This was supposed to be a homecoming of sorts, a friendly sit-down between two powerful women, one of whom had agreed to open up about everything she had been through. Meghan arrived, composed, the way she always arrives composed, which is to say that composure was itself the performance. She had prepared, she had, by all accounts, expected a certain kind of conversation, the kind she had been having in other spaces with other interviewers, where the questions were gentle and the follow-ups were gentler still, and the overall effect was something close to a long, warm embrace disguised as journalism. Robin Roberts had other ideas. The interview opened smoothly enough. There were pleasantries. There was the kind of easy laughter that television requires in its opening minutes. Robin asked about the new projects, and Meghan answered with the fluency of someone who has answered the same question many times and knows exactly which words land well with which kind of audience. It has been such an incredible journey, Meghan said, settling into the rhythm of it. And I think what has been most meaningful for me is the opportunity to be authentic, to show up as my full self and not be edited down or filtered through someone else's perspective. Robin nodded. She let the answer breathe. She gave it the space that a less experienced interviewer might mistake for agreement. Then she said, very calmly, and yet there are people who would argue that the version of yourself you present publicly has been very carefully managed. How do you respond to that? The shift was subtle but Meghan's smile held, but something behind it recalibrated. I think, Meghan began, that anyone in the public eye has to be thoughtful about how they communicate. That is not management, that is just being intentional. Sure, Robin said, but intentional and authentic can sometimes pull in opposite directions, can they not? I am thinking specifically about some of the claims that have been made over the past few years, claims that were later contradicted by documented evidence. How do you reconcile that? There was a pause. Not a long pause, but long enough. I think context matters enormously, Meghan said, and I think what people often miss is the emotional truth of an experience, even when the specific details are interpreted differently by different people. Robin tilted her head slightly. It was a small movement, almost imperceptible, but anyone who has watched her work for as long as her audience has would recognize it immediately. It was the movement she makes when she has heard an answer that is not quite an answer. Emotional truth, Robin repeated, not mockingly, just carefully, like she was weighing the phrase, turning it over, examining what it was made of. Walk me through what that means to you, because I want to make sure I understand. It means that how something feels to you in the moment is real, Meghan said, even if others experienced that same moment differently. My feelings about what happened to me were not fabricated. They were genuine. No one is questioning your feelings, Robin said. What some people have questioned is whether the events you described as the cause of those feelings actually occurred the way you said they did. Those are two different conversations. The audience was quiet, not in a bad way, but in the way that rooms go quiet when something real is happening, and everyone instinctively understands that this is not the moment to make noise. Meghan adjusted her posture almost imperceptibly. I have always stood by what I shared. I shared my truth. Your truth. Robin said, I keep hearing that phrase. I have been thinking about it a lot, actually, because what concerns me about that framing is that it implies there are multiple truths about the same event, and sometimes that is accurate. People experience things differently, but sometimes, and I am asking you about those specific times, there is just what happened and what did not happen. Do you understand the distinction I am drawing? This was the moment. This was the moment that would define the entire conversation, not just for the people watching it live, but for everyone who would see the clips later, everyone who would analyze it, replay it, discuss it in their kitchens and on their commutes. Because Meghan was now in a position she had not been placed in before, at least not on camera. By someone of Robin Roberts' stature and credibility, she could not deflect by questioning the interviewer's motives. Robin had none to question. She could not suggest the line of questioning was rooted in prejudice or hostility. Robin's history made that impossible. She could not appeal to sympathy in the way she had done elsewhere. Because Robin was not hostile, she was simply precise, and precision does not yield to sympathy. I do understand the distinction, Meghan said finally, and I would say that in every instance, I spoke from a place of honesty. Even when the palace released statements that directly contradicted what you had said on record. Institutions protect themselves. That is what they do. That is true, Robin said, and individuals also sometimes reshape narratives to serve themselves. That is also true. I am not saying one happened and not the other. I am asking you to engage with the possibility that both can be true simultaneously. There was a steadiness to Robin in this moment that was almost architectural. She was not angry. She was not performing indignation. She was doing the thing that the best interviewers do, which is to simply refuse to move on until something real has been said. Meghan looked at her. I think that is a fair thing to explore. Good, Robin said. Then let us explore it. And so, they explored it. Robin did not lunge. That was the thing about her technique that made it so effective and, from Meghan's perspective, so difficult to navigate. A lunge can be dodged. A lunge gives the person on the receiving end something to push back against, something to frame as an attack, something to survive and then speak about afterward as evidence of how they are treated. Robin did not give her that. What Robin gave her instead was patience. And patience, when deployed by someone with her level of skill, is its own kind of pressure. Let us talk about the Oprah interview, Robin said, specifically the claim about the conversation regarding your son's skin. That was a significant moment. It was heard by an enormous number of people, and then later, there was a clarification, which some people read as a partial retraction. How do you look back on that now? Meghan was composed. She had anticipated this. What I shared was exactly what I was told. I was not speculating. I was recounting a conversation. You attributed that conversation to a specific time period, Robin said, before Archie was born, if I am remembering correctly, and yet there were people within that family who disputed not just the content but the timeline entirely. What do you say to someone watching at home who genuinely does not know what to believe? I say that they should trust the person who was in the room. You were in the room, Robin said, but you were not the only one, and the other people in the room have a different account. So what you are asking the audience to do is choose between conflicting testimonies. On what basis should they make that choice? Meghan paused. On the basis of who has been transparent and who has not, I came forward. I spoke. I did not hide behind intermediaries or press offices. Coming forward is not the same as being accurate, Robin said, and the simplicity of it landed like a stone in still water. You can be genuinely convinced of something and still be mistaken. That happens to all of us. My question is whether you have ever allowed for that possibility in this particular case. I know what I experienced. I am sure you do, Robin said, and I am sure that experience was painful. I am not minimizing that at all. But here's where I keep coming back to something. You have built a significant public platform on the credibility of what you have shared. Your advocacy work, your projects, your public voice, all of it draws from the well of that credibility. And if any part of what you shared turns out to be imprecise, that does not just affect you personally. It affects the causes you attach your name to. Does that responsibility weigh on you? It was a masterful question because it could not be answered defensively without making Meghan look as though she did not care about those causes. And it could not be dismissed without conceding the underlying premise, which was that her credibility was in question. Every single thing I have shared, Meghan said, with deliberate emphasis, I have shared because I believed it to be true. I still believe it, and I will not sit here and apologize for speaking. No one is asking you to apologize for speaking, Robin said, quite the opposite. I am glad you spoke. I am asking whether what you said was true. Those are genuinely different requests. Meghan looked at her steadily. Yes, it was true. All of it. The question was two words. It sat in the air between them. All of the things I have said about my own experience. Meghan said, yes. Robin let that qualification register. She did not underline it. She did not look at the camera. She simply let it sit there for a moment. That phrase, my own experience, which was different from the way the question had been asked, and anyone paying attention would have noticed the gap between the two. Tell me about the royal family, Robin said then, pivoting with an ease that gave nothing away. Specifically, I want to understand your relationship with the institution itself, separate from the individuals. Because one of the arguments that has been made is that your critique was not really of individual people but of a system. A very old system with rules and expectations that may genuinely be incompatible with the way you see yourself and your role. Is that fair? That is part of it, Meghan said, and she sounded more comfortable on this ground. The institution is medieval in a lot of ways. There are expectations placed on women, on people of color, on anyone who does not fit the historical mold, that are simply not sustainable in the modern world. I hear that, Robin said, and I would push back gently on one thing. The word medieval suggests something rigid and unchanging. But institutions do change, even very old ones. What specific changes did you advocate for from within, before you chose to leave? Meghan blinked. I tried to raise concerns. I was not given the support I needed. What form did those concerns take? Were they formal complaints? Conversations with advisors? Written correspondence? They were conversations, and those conversations went nowhere. With whom? With people in senior positions. Can you name any of them? There was a beat. I would rather not, out of respect for those individuals. Robin nodded slowly. Okay, so you raised concerns, verbally, with unnamed individuals, and those concerns were not addressed. And the conclusion you drew from that was that the institution as a whole was beyond repair, at least for your purposes. Is that a fair summary? That is an oversimplification, Meghan said, and there was an edge in it now, the first real edge of the conversation. Then help me unsimplify it, Robin said immediately, because I want to get this right. You have said publicly, on multiple occasions and in multiple formats, that the institution failed you. I am trying to understand the specific mechanisms of that failure so that the audience can evaluate it properly. The mechanisms, Meghan said, included being denied basic protections, being refused help when I asked for it, being treated differently because of who I am. Denied basic protections, in what sense? Security, adequate staffing. There were things I needed that I was not given. After you left the working royal family, you and your family were given significant security provisions, were you not? Partly privately, partly through other arrangements. Yes, and while you were working members of the family, there were periods when I felt very unsafe. Felt unsafe, Robin repeated, not dismissively, but methodically. Were there specific incidents, documented incidents, that contributed to that feeling? There were incidents, yes. Did you report them? Some of them, and the others. I handled them privately. Why privately? If they were serious enough to speak about publicly later. And there it was. The kind of question that has no clean answer. Because the honest answer reveals something, and the evasive answer reveals something else. And either way, the person asking it has accomplished exactly what they intended. Meghan looked at Robin, with something that was not quite irritation and not quite respect but contained elements of both. Because at the time, I was trying to make it work. She said finally, I was trying to protect myself and also not destabilize things further. That is an understandable position, Robin said, and it also somewhat contradicts the narrative that you were entirely without support or agency during that period. If you had the capacity to make strategic choices about what to report and what to handle privately, then there was some degree of agency there, which is human and not shameful, but it complicates the picture. I never said I was entirely without agency. Your public statements have at times implied it fairly strongly, Robin said, and I am not here to trap you. I am here because I think the public deserves a conversation that goes deeper than the version we have heard before. You are a smart woman. You know what you said and how it was received. My question is whether, sitting here now, you think that reception was entirely earned. The question was elegant in its construction because it left room for nuance while also making retreat very difficult. Meghan could say yes, the reception was earned, and implicitly confirm every criticism leveled at her. Or she could say no, the reception was not earned, and spend the rest of the interview defending that position against a woman who had just spent 20 minutes demonstrating that she had done her homework. Meghan chose a third path. I think the conversation around me has often been more about people's pre-existing feelings than about what I actually said. Robin smiled. It was a real smile, not a polite one. Now that, she said, is something I genuinely agree with. People's feelings about you are often more about them than about you. That is true for almost every public figure. But it is also a way of not answering the question. The audience exhaled. It was almost audible. Let me try again, Robin continued, still smiling, still warm, still utterly immovable. Looking back at the Oprah interview specifically, the one that a significant portion of the world watched, is there anything you would say differently now? The question sat between them like something that had been placed there very deliberately, which of course it had. Is there anything you would say differently now? Meghan took a breath. Not a shaky one, not a dramatic one, just the breath of someone who is buying herself a single second to decide which version of herself is going to answer. I think, she said slowly, that I would have provided more context in certain areas. Some things that I said were heard in ways I did not intend, such as, Robin said, the conversation about Archie. I think people interpreted that as an accusation directed at specific individuals, and my intention was never to point at one person. And yet you did not correct that interpretation for quite some time, Robin said. It circulated widely. It shaped public opinion about people who, by your own current account, may not have been the target of what you were saying. How do you think about your responsibility in that? I think the media amplified it beyond anything I could have controlled. You gave the media the material, Robin said simply. You chose to share it in the way that you did, in the format that you did, to an audience of that size. The amplification was a foreseeable consequence of those choices. So I want to return to the question of responsibility, not legal responsibility, moral responsibility, to the people who were named, unnamed but identifiable, in that conversation. Do you feel any? Meghan straightened. I feel that I had a right to speak about what happened to me. That was not the question. The directness of it was startling even in a conversation that had been consistently direct. There was no hostility in Robin's voice, but there was an absolute refusal to be redirected, and it was the kind of refusal that money cannot buy and experience alone produces. Do you feel any moral responsibility? Robin repeated. To the people who were affected by what you said. A long pause, longer than any that had come before it. I feel that I acted with integrity, Meghan said. Robin looked at her. That is also not the question, but I will note that you have now answered a question I did not ask 3 times in a row. That is a pattern. The audience shifted. Not uncomfortably, more like the way a crowd shifts when a game changes and everyone suddenly understands that the rules are different now. I am not trying to be evasive, Meghan said, and there was something in her voice that had not been there before. Something that was not quite vulnerability but was adjacent to it. I know you are not, Robin said, and I want to be clear because I think this matters for the people watching. I am not conducting this interview to embarrass you or to score points. I am conducting it because the story you have told has had real consequences for real people. And I think you are capable of a more honest conversation about it than you have had in other settings. I believe that about you, which is why I am still here asking. It was a remarkable thing to say, and it was a remarkable thing to witness, because it was generous and unsparing simultaneously. It did not let Meghan off the hook. It did not condemn her either. It simply held the standard and expected her to meet it. Meghan looked at Robin for a long moment. There are things I wish had been handled differently, she said, on all sides, including yours, including mine. It was the closest thing to an admission that had been heard from her in any public forum, and Robin received it without celebration, without leaning forward, without any of the theatrical responses that a less disciplined interviewer might have offered. She simply nodded once and moved on, which was in its own way more powerful than anything else she could have done. Let us talk about the work you are doing now, Robin said, because I do not want this conversation to be only about the past. You have projects, you have advocacy work, you have a platform. What are you trying to build? And Meghan, who had been bracing for another volley, visibly recalibrated. I want to create space for women to tell their own stories, particularly women who have been told that their stories are not valid or not important or too complicated for people to understand. That is meaningful work, Robin said. And given everything we have discussed today, do you see any irony in the fact that the credibility required to do that work is exactly what has been questioned? I see the challenge in it, Meghan said. How do you address it? By continuing to show up, by being consistent, by letting what I do speak for itself over time. Consistency is important, Robin said. It is something I have always believed. And consistency means that the standard you hold others to is the same one you hold yourself to. Do you think you have always done that? Meghan looked at her. I think I am working toward it. That, Robin said, is the most honest thing you have said today. And then, something unexpected happened. Meghan laughed. A real laugh, brief and a little raw. The laugh of someone who has just been caught out in the most benign possible way and knows it. And Robin laughed too. And for a moment, the tension of the preceding hour lifted, and what was visible underneath it was 2 women, both of whom understood exactly what had just taken place. I want to ask you one more thing, Robin said. And the ease of the moment was still there, but the precision returned with it. You have spoken a great deal about the importance of being seen and heard, and I think that desire is genuine. But there is a version of being seen that requires being known, truly known. Not just the version of yourself that you want the world to have. Are you prepared for that? Because that is what actual accountability looks like. Not a curated transparency, a real one. Meghan was quiet for a moment. I think I am getting there. Good, Robin said, because the work you say you want to do, the space you say you want to create for other women, it requires exactly that. It requires you to be the thing you are asking others to be. And right now, today, in this conversation, you have taken some steps in that direction. I genuinely mean that. It was not a compliment designed to soften a blow. It was not a production note or a moment of television graciousness. It was something rarer than either of those things. It was accurate. Meghan had taken steps. Not enough, perhaps, by the measure of everyone watching, but steps nonetheless. And Robin, who had spent the better part of an hour refusing to let her slide, was now refusing to let that go unacknowledged. Thank you, Meghan said. And then, more quietly, this was not what I expected. It rarely is, Robin said. That is the point. The cameras held on both of them for a moment. 2 women. Neither of them finished with the conversation they were having. even if the television version of it was almost over. And in that moment, in that held frame, something was visible that most television interviews never produce, which is the actual cost of honesty. What it looks like on a person's face when they have been asked to pay it and have, reluctantly, partially, imperfectly, begun to do so. Robin Roberts did not shout. She did not accuse. She did not perform outrage or reach for the kind of confrontation that generates heat without light. She did something harder and more lasting. She simply refused to accept less than the truth. And she did it with such consistency and such craft that there was no clean way out of it. Not for Meghan, not for anyone. What you watched today was not a humiliation in the way that word is usually meant. It was something more precise than that. It was an exposure, quiet, methodical, and for that reason, permanent. And the most remarkable thing about it was that Robin Roberts smiled all the way through.